My name is Mark. I get to be the lead pastor here. And to kick off, can we all agree that normal is the setting on a washing machine? There's no such thing as a normal life. Everybody has a different path in life. But I want to introduce you to Joe here. And what I'm going to share with you is a little bit of his story of who he is. And it's going to seem quite basic and kind of whatever the world would ask it to be normal. So this is Joe when he was a little boy. And one of the first things he understood is that he was a son to his dad. He's a son to his mother. And he's got a sister, which makes him a brother. And he's got a brother, which also makes him a brother. What else do we know about Joe? Along the way, he finds out that he has cousins. That makes him a cousin. And you know what they say about Joe? He's a good kid. As he gets a little bit older, he learns about soccer. He becomes a soccer player. And then he hears his friends are into something called baseball. And so he starts playing baseball. In fourth grade, he gets the opportunity to learn to play an instrument. So he picks up the trumpet. He becomes a musician. By the time fifth grade is over, he's not very good at the trumpet. So now he knows that he's not a musician, all right? So that's Joe so far. But then he gets to middle school, and things are starting to change with Joe. Joe's a little bit bigger. As though these things are true, it just feels like something new is going on regarding his life. But what they continue to tell him, and his parents continue to tell him, is that he's a good kid. Now, the kids in school don't say that to him. They tell him he's a loser. But then he finds a group to be a part of. But just like middle school goes, he's not a part of that group after a while. And so he has to find a new group that he gets to be a part of. Oh, and then that thing doesn't work out. He shifts, and by 8th grade, he's in a different group. His parents at some point start going to church. And so church starts becoming a part of this thing. He goes out for the football team, and he makes it. Everybody makes the football team in middle school. One of his cousins plays guitar, and he wants to play the guitar, so he picks up the guitar and he starts learning the guitar. And then those years went by so fast, and next thing you know, he's starting to get a little bit bigger, and he's in high school. Right? And it feels like it's a blank slate. Who is he? How's he going to belong? What's his identity? Well, right away, he joins the football team. Everybody makes the freshman team. And then he finds a group to belong with. He starts hanging with some friends. He goes to a camp somewhere along the way, and he learns about Jesus and becomes a Christian. And then he has a group, and he gets another group he starts hanging with. Along the way, he's in high school, something happens, and he ends up becoming a boyfriend. And then along the way, something happened, and he's not a boyfriend anymore, all right? And then high school, those years go so fast, next thing you know, he has graduated, and he's a graduate. And now he needs to pick one of the 3 paths given to kids. Is he going to go into the trades? Is he going to go to college? Is he going to go into the military? Will he do a gap year maybe? Where's it going to be? Where's it going to be? He lands on college, right? All right. And all of a sudden, there's a fresh new identity as he goes to the state school, right? All right, bear with me. I'm not a great drawer. This is my best shot at a sweatshirt. All right, so he joins a fraternity. And then he also joins a Christian group. And then along the way, some friends get him to go to a church. He decides on his major. It's going to be business. He just decides on his focus. It's going to be business management. His mother says, "Why don't you call?" And he remembers that he's a son, All right? Those years went so fast, all of a sudden, he has graduated. Okay? Next thing you know, he's got to take off the sweatshirt and put off a collared shirt. Yes, this is a collared shirt. All right. All right. So the next thing you know, Joe gets to know that he is employed. All right. And now he is also a renter. All right. Along the way, he gets to start paying his own car insurance. All right. Next thing you know, he's hanging out there. He ends up becoming a boyfriend. And then he realizes he's not a boyfriend anymore, all right? He remembers something along the way. He's a Christian, right? He starts finding his way back to a church. He decides this is something kind of cool. He becomes a dog owner. His sister has a child. Now he is an uncle. He hasn't talked to her in a while. He's also a brother. He's a boyfriend again. Next thing you know, he's engaged, and now he's married. All right. Now, this isn't the normal thing. This is what maybe the world has told us to do. All right. So on top of his dress shirt, he now has what is supposed to be a formal shirt for getting married, right? All right. Now that he's married, he has an identity as a clueless husband. He has no idea what he's doing. In his cluelessness, he reaches out to his faith and he remembers he's a Christian, right? And they just start saying, hey, maybe we need to get involved in a church, right? But at his work, he becomes a manager, which is pretty awesome. All of a sudden, he's got some money. He starts becoming an investor. And next thing you know, he says, I guess I need to become a homeowner. Next thing you know, he's a dad. Oh, my goodness. These phases go by so fast. And so now he gets another sheet. It's not like these things aren't true, but every time these phases change, it feels like you're a blank slate. And regardless of what's true, he gets the greatest dad shirt somewhere around the third Sunday of June. All right, the kid starts growing up, and he decides he's going to be a coach. His parents start getting sick, and he remembered that he needs to be a son. All right? And starts ending up dealing with the stuff with his parents, and he remembers that he's a brother, and that's not always easy. His kids start getting older, and he feels like he's a freaking ATM, all right? All right? Kids move out of the house. Now what? Feels like an entirely new phase of life. Yeah, that is supposed to be a golf shirt, all right? All right, so who is he? He's like not so sure, right? But he remembers he's a manager. He remembers that guitar he used to play when he was a kid. And, we're married, right? We should start working on that thing. Decides he's a husband. His parents are near death. He starts thinking about what it means to be a son. Reflects on his faith and starts thinking about what it means to be a Christian. Leans into his church. Along the way, he retires. What does that mean? Does that mean he's a golfer now? Does that mean that he's now a Floridian? Right? Does that mean make him a Floridian? But it does remind him about his church, even as he becomes a grandparent. I don't know if this is normal. Normal's a setting on a washing machine, right? But this is Joe. Who is Joe? Joe's going to answer that question, who am I? How does he answer it? Who is he? Now, I didn't add all the sort of other, we didn't talk about race, we didn't talk about socioeconomic factors, we didn't talk about anything bad necessarily happening, right? Nothing out of the ordinary, no unique sufferings, car accidents, all the sorts of things that happen in life, we didn't include any of those things that would shape who he is. Who is he? Now, along the way, we talked about that unique thing when it comes to him becoming a Christian. What that means is that certain things became true of him that are going to always be true of him and forever be true of him. At some point in time, Joe's life in this world is going to end, and all of this will roll up, and his friends are going to come together, and they're going to remember Joe's life and every layer of his life, and they'll celebrate that life. But what will always be true of Joe will be these things here. When it comes to our faith, one of the things that we know will be true for us for eternity, but are true for us now, is the fact that we are free in Christ. We are holy in Christ. We are victors in Christ. We are loved. We are rich. We are a child. We are justified. We are family members. And we can go on and on and on and on. And that is what eternity is going to be, living out these truths. And yes, will we bring our story? Will we bring our personality? Will our wounds shape our experience? We will bring our physical appearance, yet a glorified version of our physical appearance into eternity. But the things that are going to be true for us forever are also true of us now. And the Christian life, in so many ways, is helping ourselves integrate the truth about our forever into the reality of our temporary experience. All right? Our series, Who Am I?, is about rooting ourselves into these things that are everlasting and finding our confidence, finding our security, finding our joy, our hope, and our strength in these things that will never change versus these things that are going to change every 3 to 10 years. All right? So we've been studying the book of Philippians since the beginning of the year, and we have gotten halfway through. Great job, everybody, okay? What I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and read for us Philippians chapter 3, verses 1 through 4. Let's go ahead and stand together, but I'm going to read this myself, but you guys can stand, and we will listen together. Reading from Philippians chapter 3, verses 1 to 4. Further, my brothers and sisters, rejoice in the Lord. It is no trouble for me to write the same things to you again, and it is a safeguard for you. Watch out for those dogs, those evildoers, those mutilators of the flesh, for it is we who are the circumcision. We who serve God by His Spirit, who boast in Christ Jesus, and who put no confidence in the flesh, though I myself have reasons for such confidence. If someone else thinks they have reasons to put confidence in the flesh, I have more. All right, thanks so much. Go ahead and have a seat. I read that myself because I just think it would be awkward for us to say all together, we are the circumcision. All right, so anyway, when it comes to, you might have noticed a few unique pieces of language. I'm going to get to what those things mean. We're going to look at particularly the first 3 verses of this passage. And the very point I'm going after today is that we need to recognize that our identity has to be protected because it's what our joy is attached to and is where we build our confidence upon. All right, so let me just start with the first one. Our identity must be protected. All right, Paul says probably one of the strongest statements in the New Testament. He is speaking to a group of people in the city of Philippi, a church that he helped start. He was a church planner. He started that church there with about a dozen, maybe a dozen people max. But the church had grown and had flourished and was kind of hanging on. But something was going on, and he was concerned. There was a group of people showing up known as the Judaizers. And a little bit of background here, and Well, the reason I'm going into this background is that anytime the Bible uses the term like mutilators of the flesh, like an explanation mechanism kicks in for preachers. We need to explain that. Has anybody used the term mutilators of the flesh in conversation this past week? No, it's just not something we use, and it's actually kind of an awful term. And why would Paul refer to someone like that? All right. So stepping back as to why he would do that is this: the New Testament church. This letter was written about 25, maybe 30 years after the death and the resurrection of Jesus. So think of an event that might have happened in the mid-90s. All right. He's writing to explain the implications of that event. Well. The church in Jerusalem grew very, very fast. Many people believed in Jesus because there are so many eyewitnesses of his resurrection, and that it became very, very awkward for the Romans and the Jewish religious community. And so a significant persecution broke out against those Christians there, and they're scattered throughout the entire Roman world. And so what happened is these Christians had no place to go. They couldn't stay there in Jerusalem or Judea or even Galilee. So they went to the different cities in the Roman Empire to find refuge. And when they got there, they started explaining why they were there. And other people began hearing this news that we described the gospel, this good news of what happened to Jesus. And they started putting their faith. And so these churches started forming all the way throughout the Roman Empire. Now there are many Christians that were still in Judea and Jerusalem that hung in there. And when they heard about this, they said, we have to make sure they know what to do. How are these Christians in these Gentile areas going to know what to do? We need to go tell them about Moses and all the laws. And so these Judaizers, as Paul described them, went throughout, we're going from city to city and finding the churches and say, you need to understand, Jesus was a Jew. Therefore, you need to be a Jew. And so you need to obey the law of Moses, particularly circumcision. And they weren't telling them about the law like, hey, love God, love your neighbor. They're like, you guys better become Jews really, really fast because this whole thing's going to get out of control. And Paul had to stop that. And I'll explain this in a moment. Him stopping that might have been one of the most significant things that has shaped the world and particularly Western culture since then. And I know that's a pretty strong statement. You're like, dude, that's a strong statement. Let me back it up. I'll explain why. Now, you might be thinking circumcision seems like a really bad church growth method. And yes, that's it. But there was a deeper issue. There was a much, much deeper issue at hand. See, to the Judaizers, they had good intentions. They had been raised up with the law and the Old Testament, and Jesus made it all make sense. But so much of their faith at that point in time was attached to these traditions that many of them Jesus fulfilled, that did not need to extend into this new era of the church. But in their minds, how can you be a follower of God without keeping all these Jewish traditions? And if the Judaizers would have succeeded, what would have happened to Christianity is that Christianity, the gospel, would have been bound up and encapsulated into a cultural form. And if it was bound up into a cultural form, when you announced the good news, you would say, here's the good news, you need to start acting like first century Jews. And what I would suggest, the power of the gospel has been that it can transcend all cultures. It's not attached to any cultural form. It is spread throughout all of the world, from generation to generation, from continent to continent, from people group to people group, by both challenging the culture, yet not submitting to any culture, because the gospel isn't you do these things in this particular way. The gospel is the announcement that something happened that changes everything. And so you can announce that something happening to every single culture. Even though it happened in one culture, the announcement is for every single culture. Jesus said, come to me, all who are weary He didn't say, come to me all who have performed well this week. He didn't say, come to me all who have all the answers. He didn't say, come to me all who agree with me theologically. He didn't say, come to me all who agree with me politically. He didn't say, come to me all who look like me. He didn't say, come to me all of you who behave well. He didn't say, come to me all who are in a certain stage of life. He said, come to me all who are weary, and I will give you rest. Just like Zach was talking earlier and Rachel was talking earlier, there are people from all over the world, and there's from all throughout history, who have come to him and found rest from every cultural, socioeconomic strata, who are coming to Jesus weary and finding rest. And you can too. No matter what phase of your life, whatever page of your life you're on, no matter what the labels that the world wants to put on you, you can come to him and find rest. All of these things can be true for you right now. You can live in light of what is always going to be true of you, but you need to protect it. Because point number two is this. Point number two is this. You need to protect it because your joy is attached to it. He talked about these mutilators of the flesh, these dogs, these opponents who are trying to bring this other cultural label to slap on the faith. And he had to stop that because he wanted to protect their identity in Christ. And listen how he says it. He says it this way. He says, my brothers and sisters, rejoice in the Lord. It is no trouble for me to write the same things to you again, and it is a safeguard for you. Why? Because these dogs, these mutilators of flesh, they're going to try and slap these other labels on you. He says you need to protect it. And the way you protect it is by rejoicing in the Lord. And all throughout this letter to the Philippians, Paul continues to talk to them about the sense of joy, which is kind of like happiness, but a sort of a defiant happiness that's regardless of circumstances, regardless of situation. You might remember Paul is in prison, and all of his career ambitions seem throttled. He's in prison, and all of his desires for comfort are throttled. Everything that he might want in life is throttled, and yet he is able to find joy. And within the church or within Christianity, I think that there is a myth that if you come to Jesus and if you come to Christ and you have a faith in him, you're going to have this joy that bubbles out from the inside. And that's kind of partially true, but most people mistake that for just a buoyant personality. There's some of that is true. The fruit of the Spirit, one of the fruits of the Spirit is joy. But when you hear Paul, he speaks of joy with the idea of a direct object. He rejoices in something. The joy is a loop. It's a circular loop, like you put your joy in this thing and it returns joy to you. A lot of folks in our region got a lot of joy out of watching the Phillies run into the playoffs this past fall. And we got a lot of joy in the Eagles run to the Super Bowl this winter, right? We attached some of our joy there, and it returns to us. It was a good thing until it wasn't, right? Grandparents, there's something about having grandchildren that you can just put your joy in them, and you just ride their upbringing or ride all the ups and downs without having to have the responsibility of those kids, right? You get all the fun without the responsibility. Where are you on that up and down spectrum? How well is your joy distributed? Where have you attached it to? Is it attached in one thing that's going to be just one other thing that's going to take you up and down? Paul says if you want to be secure, If you want to have joy regardless of your circumstances, put your joy in the gospel, which continues to grow and bear fruit throughout the world. Put your joy in the church, a group of people that you can be a family member with, a group of people you're going to be with for the rest of eternity. Put your joy in these truths that will never change. These pages of your life are going to come and go, and you can attach yourself to any one of these particular labels, but a new page may get put on top of that at any moment. At any moment, these things, which are wonderful in and of themselves, they're just momentary versus the things that will last. Maturity in the faith, we often assume it has something to do with knowledge or just age, or we look at people who might have more than us when it comes to affluence or wealth. And we have these ways of ascribing wealth to those sorts of things. But maturity in the faith looks like having joy in the things that matter and growing confident in because you've learned to trust God there. All right? Maturity in the faith is learning to be confident that no matter what happens in our life, we can trust God with those things. We have to protect our identity because our joy is attached to it. And the third thing is our confidence is built upon our identity. Our confidence is built upon our identity. All right, so in many ways, what you have in Philippi is you have this case study as to what does maturity look like? And the Judaizers are coming saying like, hey, yeah, these things are true, but you better get circumcised and start acting like a Jew now because that's what we do. That is what belief in Yahweh is. It's about doing these rules. And Paul's like, no. We can't add all that stuff. He's like, you're never able to obey those things. Why are you going to add that to a bunch of Gentiles? It's like, that's not what maturity is. And like I said, when I was new in my faith, I was like, oh, if I would just know a lot, then I'll always know, and then I'll always know, and I'll never get surprised by anything. And knowing stuff has been helpful, and becoming wise has been helpful, and learning from things has been helpful. But Paul, throughout the book of Philippians, continues to speak of confidence. And what I have found in my life is that I've been attracted to the faith of people who may not show up in material wealth, and may not show up in like this otherworldly success. It might not show up in tremendous knowledge of doctrine, but they have a sense of confidence in who God is. Why? Because they've attached their joy to Him, and they've seen the return, and they've learned to trust Him. They've learned to trust Him over time. Courage comes from faith. Confidence comes with the experience of acting in courage, putting your trust in God, putting your joy in something that's of God, and seeing it return. And learning to trust Him over time. We learn to trust that these things are true. When this thing happens, when life starts taking that downturn, the particular page I'm on might not look good, but the things that really matter forever are not changing. And people who experience that know how to turn that personal experience around and come up with a stability, a security to live confidently no matter what happens. Since it's the beginning of baseball season, will you indulge me one last sports story? 2016, it was a unique World Series. It was two teams that had never won the World Series before, the Cleveland Indians, the Cubs. The Chicago Cubs have never even been to the World Series before. And so the Indians and Cubs were in the seventh game, and it was late in the seventh game, and the Cubs were up 6-3. And they brought in the best closer in the game, Aroldis Chapman, to shut down the Indians. And guess what happens? he didn't shut down the Indians, and they tied the game. Near the end of the game is tied. It's the bottom of the ninth, and the game ends, or after 9 innings, the game is tied, and next thing you know, it starts raining a little, then a lot, and there's a rain delay of all things after 9 innings in the 7th game of the World Series, tied 6-6. Now, you need to know something about the Cubs. The Cubs had this thing called the curse of the billy goat. They had never, it's been 108 years, they had never even been to the World Series. It's hard to be that bad. It's really hard to be that bad for that long. But somebody in 1945 decided that they were going to bring their billy goat to the game that was going to determine whether the Cubs were going to go to the World Series or not. And who brings a billy goat to a baseball game? Anyway, that guy got thrown out, and the Cubs lost, and they all blamed it on the curse of the billy goat. And the Cubs were just bad, decade after decade. A couple of times they were kind of good, but they never got near the World Series, except for that one time in 2003 when they were 5 outs from the World Series, and then on a fly ball to left field, Steve Bartman reaches over the wall and interferes with the ball, and the wheels fall off. The team loses the game, they lose the series, and they don't go to the World Series. And everybody in Chicago blames Steve Bartman. He needed security and a lot of counseling. And so they have this thing in their head, and here it is. They got to the 7th game. They're up 3 runs. They're just about to win the World Series, and they blow it again. And there they are sitting in the locker room. That's where their right fielder steps forward with one simple message for the team. He says, you guys need to remember who you are. You had a better record than anybody in Major League Baseball this year. You already won a division championship. You already won a conference championship. And when you were down 3-1, you came back and made this a game 7. Chicago Cubs, I don't care what about the history of the Chicago Cubs. The players in this room are winners. You need to remember who you are. They went out in the top of the 10th inning. They scored 2 runs, and they won the World Series. They remembered who they are. I don't know what the different labels have been put upon you on the different pages of your life. I don't know how much you dwell on the names that have been given to you according to your life, but I want to remind you of who you are. In Christ, you are a winner. We are victors. In Christ, you are free. In Christ, you are holy. I don't care what you might be ashamed of. When Jesus looks at you, he sees you as holy. You are loved. You are a child of the Father. You are a family member. You belong, and you will always belong. I don't care what anybody has ever said to you. You will always belong. I don't care what it feels like. You are rich. He became poor so that you might become rich. You are justified. And I can go on and on and on. These are the things that are true of you.